Hi, I'm here today with Gaia Morrissette, who is a holistic sexual wellness specialist. So I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us about you and what does a holistic sexual wellness specialist do?
Oh, so many things.
I bet.
So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you, Veronika. So I'm a holistic sexual wellness specialist, a BDSM wellness specialist, a high priestess of divine sexual magic and elemental magics, a pro dominatrix. That's just in a nutshell. So basically what I do is I make sex better, I make sex safe, and I help people take sex to the next level. And I do this through speaking, training, coaching, facilitation. And I look at sex as a holistic approach. So there's mind, body, and spirit. And in the center of that is who we are as a sexual being. And who we are as a sexual being, I found 5 aspects that make us who we are. We have the safety, so play, which is all about safety, sensuality, which is all about being in the body, sexuality, which is about, well, orgasmic fun, the exploration, which is, one of my favorite aspects of human sexuality, which is kink, exploration, alternative lifestyles. It's all about the moving beyond vanilla sex into the more explorational space. And then the sacred, which is all tantra, sacred sexual practices, and things like that. But if each one of those are out of whack, we are out of whack. So that's basically in a nutshell who I am, what I do, and how I show up in the world.
All right, so it's about balancing all those different things.
Yes.
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 Finding a healthy balance. Awesome. So can you take us through the journey that led to becoming a holistic sexual wellness specialist?
So the first thing is that's the question everybody wants to know is like, how did you end up doing your job?
Yeah, exactly. How'd you get into this? Tell me more.
So I always tell everybody this story that this was my destiny, whether I wanted it to be or not. And there's this moment where I answer the call of destiny without realizing that's what I'm doing. So that's the moment that I want to share with you. When I was about 14, 15 years old, my mother brought me to this women's gathering that I thought was like so not cool. I got there were no boys. There's no boys here. And these women are weird, fast forward, I become one of these weird women. But back then they were incredibly strange to me. So I ran downstairs. I was hiding all by myself. I was reading this book, hiding from the weird women. And when this woman walks in her like early 60s, late 60s, early 70s, and she blurts out, like, not like hello, my name is, just blurts out, I've never had an orgasm. And I remember being that age of 14, 15 years old. And I remember feeling like at that point, it'd been the worst thing I'd ever heard anybody say to me. Because I had already experienced orgasm at that point in my life. I couldn't imagine living till I was ancient, because, when you're that age, that's
right.
what that looks like. I'm like, I couldn't imagine. So I was like, that's awful. And I put my book down and the woman started crying. And I went over to her and I hugged her. And she starts talking about it's too late. I'm like, it's never too late to have an orgasm. And I proceeded to teach her that she could do this through masturbation. And that was the moment. Like, that was the moment that I had said yes, I didn't know in that moment.
At
that's
14. Wow.
At 14, I had no idea that's what was happening. But that's what happened. I actually ended up going to school to work with abused women and children. Like I still didn't want to do the sexuality work. Like I was like, I don't want that job. I don't want that job. So I went to school, worked with abused, to learn to work with abused women and children, because people also came and talked to me a lot about their trauma. And so I went to school, did that. And yet everywhere I went, people were talking to me about sex. I get into a cab driver would be telling me about his erectile dysfunction, and standing at the bus stop and somebody would tell me about, how he was having a hard time getting his wife off last night. And it's like, it was part of my existence. So I ended up actually owning a pottery and drumming teaching studio for 12 years. And while I was doing this basically art therapy stuff, people, of course, were still talking to me about sex. And eventually I was like, okay, clearly this is what I'm meant to do. So 12 years ago, I closed down my pottery studio, my pottery drumming studio, and I stepped into this role full time.
Wow, what a great story. Thank you for sharing. I wouldn't have expected that this kind of seed came out of a 14-year-old.
No.
Really interesting. Awesome. So you're also an advocate for body acceptance. So can you take us back to your school years and your experience with your body and the changes that were occurring during that time?
Yes. So I had some pretty drastic body changes through my life. Um, so growing up, I was very, very thin, and so I had like this perfect body, and yet I also had breasts, and I had like some curves, but I was also very thin. So I was like, from what our beauty society standpoint was, I was drop dead gorgeous. And so my whole life up to the age of 25, that's how I moved in the world. And I got to gain a lot of beauty privilege because of it. And, everybody gave me what I wanted because I was hot, and everybody, even it was just, that was just my life. Right. And then I was in a major car accident when I was 25. And my body and life changed drastically. I went from like looking from being smoking hot to gaining a whole bunch of weight, and there not being any way for me to change my body back to what it was, because my metabolism changed, my body changed. I was in this brutal accident. I was bedridden for like 3-4 months. I couldn't even brush my own hair. So I drastically gained weight. And there was no like changing that. That was just reality. And I had to grieve the old body. Like I had to do this serious grieving of the goddess that I was, and all the beauty privilege that came from society. So it wasn't just my own internal stuff. It was externally how the world saw me. And I remember the first time walking out in the world and like everybody not being like, oh, guys walked into the room, we all want to fuck her. Like I was like, what is happening? Why are people ignoring me? What is this? And it was devastating. Like it was absolutely devastating. But then I was started the journey of like self-acceptance and healing, like really healing my own body image stuff. And and I created a whole bunch of tools of how to heal that. I did a lot of mirror work. I did a whole bunch of work to really come back to this place of finding myself beautiful and sexy, and wanting to wanting to have sex with me wanting to have sex with me.
Mhm.
And what was interesting that happened, as soon as I was back to like, I would look in the mirror and wink and be like, I totally sleep with you, my beauty privilege came back. It had nothing to do with what I physically looked like. It had everything to do with how beautiful and sexy I felt, how beautiful and sexy I saw myself. And because I saw myself that way, the world mirrored back to me what I saw. And so since then, it's been a very different journey. And there's many different, I mean, there's moments where I still have like there's that hiccup of body image issues and not feeling beautiful and not feeling sexy. Like right now, I actually recently quit smoking. And so this is a great conversation to be having, because I just recently quit smoking. So my metabolism has dropped, slowed down, and I have gained weight, even though I work out 6 days a week and I'm training for an open swim marathon, and I eat nothing but fruits, vegetables, and meat. And I'm super healthy. I'm healthier than I've ever been in my whole life.
Right.
And yet I'm still gaining weight. And how do I come to terms with that and love this new body and come to this place of self-acceptance with the where my body is at right now.
Mhm.
And I'll be honest, I'm still struggling with it. Like I'm,
It's a
like
practice.
practice, so I'm still struggling with it. So, today's a good day. I was like, I looked in the mirror, I'm like, oh my God, you're hot. Yesterday was not that day. Yesterday was like, oh my God, I'm getting fat. That's
Right.
like,
So
so,
what created that shift in you that allowed you to accept your body, that brought you to the mirror and forced or asked you to change the perception that you had of yourself?
well, because I did so much work with cognitive behavioral stuff in my life, like I was always doing this healing work, right? So I was always doing this healing work on my own self and self-worth and self-esteem and self-love. And so, I'd been on this journey since I was 16 years old of healing my own trauma. And so I realized that me hating my body was not supporting the lifestyle that I had created, which was learning to love who I am.
Mm.
And so that was where it was like this, that was the big piece, was like, okay, I'm out of whack here. The other part is that I spent my whole life up to that point being incredibly arrogant. I'm gonna totally own this. Incredibly vain, incredibly arrogant, and cocky, incredibly cocky. And that came from this internal confidence, and it came from this, like, I'm totally fucking hot, and the world wants me.
Right.
And I didn't like that. I didn't feel that internally. Like, that was the other piece for me, was like, that was like a part of how I moved in the world. That's how I was fearless in the world. That's how I was a warrior in the world. That was like, it was like my armor that my fuel and my armor that I moved in the world with. And I'm like, it's gone. This lump of curled up in the fetal position. No one will want to have sex with me again, and I'm fat and I'm ugly. I'm like, that was so not who I am or was or loved being. So I was like, oh yeah, we're fixing that shit. Like, that was my motivator for me.
Right. Awesome. So I want to share this this article that I fell on and get your opinion on it. So a recent study on associative learning writes, people make decisions about how appearance is related to success based on how we see people represented in society. And the person writing the article that was speaking about the study asks, is there a danger that in socially accepting and promoting people who are innately unhealthy, thin or obese, that we could be opening the door to increasing the issue of eating disorders and obesity in America? What's your take on that?
Um, well, I do think that when we create, how do I want to put this? What we see, whether in the media, what we see is our image of beauty and our image of attachment to all the things that go along with that. So, like I was talking earlier, that beauty privilege that I was talking about that goes along with that. What if you can't see yourself in that? You can't put yourself in that place to receive it. So I do think that there's something to be said about what we see is how we value ourselves. However, that doesn't mean that we can't change that narrative. It doesn't mean that we can't change that belief, but we do need to change it with some imagery that will represent where we are at. And I don't think that, I think our whole obsession about what we look like, and goes deeper than just about what we look like, and it goes deeper into whether it creates eating disorders and obesity. I mean, the whole thing is that we value based on our appearance, period. And I think that's the bigger problem, is that our sense of self-esteem and self-worth and whether we're worthy of being loved is based on this external obsession with beauty and
It's
this
subjective.
it's subjective. It's completely subjective. And if you don't see yourself in any of those things, that's where it leads us to running into some serious problems.
Totally. I totally agree. I think you really hit the nail on the head with this one. It's about value. It's not so much about what we see, but it's how the value that we put to it.
Yeah, completely.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And when we can change, which means that we then have the power to change the value that we place on those things.
Exactly. Absolutely. So that brings me to a quote that I heard that I really loved by Victoria Wellsby, who does a TED Talk. You don't have to be healthy to be a worthy human being. You know, I love that. When I heard that, I was like, oh my God, that's so nice, you know, and it's true. And it's like, everyone is worthy. Everyone is equal. Doesn't matter what you look like. Doesn't matter what body you have, what race you are. We are all equal beings. And that's what we need to be focusing on. That's what we need to be putting energy on reteaching ourselves, that we are all equal beings of the exact same worth and value.
Yes, absolutely. I want to share one of the tools that really helped me come back to what we originally were talking about, my own journey around coming to this place of self-acceptance of my body. There's like two pieces. So the first one was I needed to find new imagery that represented my new beauty ideal. And so what was really fascinating is I had some Tantra friends who had asked me to become their poster child for all of their Tantra teachings, so to speak, right? So they're like, hey, come, do a photo shoot. So I go and do a photo shoot, and it's a sexy photo shoot and all these things. And it was like starting to change the narrative of that, my body's not this tiny little body, which makes it sexy. It's just more voluptuous body, which can make it sexy. And I walked into their house a couple months after the photo shoot, and there's this beautiful, like breathtaking goddess picture on their wall. And I'm like, wow, this is such a beautiful picture. I mean, she's like, this woman's a goddess. And they started laughing. They started absolutely laughing. They're like, that's you. Like, I didn't recognize it as me.
Wow.
That was how much my distortion of perception of who I was versus who I had become. And I didn't even recognize it. I didn't recognize my boobs. I didn't recognize my body. I was like fully naked in this goddess picture, and I had no idea it was me, right? And so I was like, so that's the problem. That's why I couldn't come to this place of self-acceptance, no matter how much talk I did to myself and blah, blah, blah. And all, it was not fucking working because my imagery wasn't there. I didn't have it anywhere of what this new body and the beauty of this new body was. So what I did was I went home, I took all of the photos that were done in the photo shoot, and I put them all over my house. They were in my bedroom, in my bathroom, on the walls. They were everywhere. This is my house, and I'm reclaiming my beauty, and my body is beautiful, and my naked body is beautiful, and I'm learning to see this image. And so what was happening was because I posted it everywhere, it gave me this new beautiful appreciation and framework of what is my new version of beauty? What is my new version of sexy? And one day I remember looking in the mirror and be like, fuck, you're hot. I totally want to fuck you. I'm like, I'm back. Yay. So that was one thing that was really powerful. And I find that I with women that I'm doing work, especially around body image and body shifting and changing and stuff, it's the number one thing I recommend is going and getting a sexy photo shoot done, and then visually seeing those pictures, because it helps your brain to create a new possibility, a new beauty possibility, a new sexy possibility that didn't exist in your noggin, in your subconscious mind before.
You get to get the way other people see you rather than the way you see yourself through all these layers of judgment and self-consciousness.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing that's been so profoundly healing for me is hanging out at the nudist resort.
Mm.
Because what I see is naked
Real
bodies,
real
real
bodies.
bodies, different ages, different cultures, different sizes, different, all these things. And I can see my body shape in other people because I don't see my body shape in media, in television, in things. So this is a really great way of changing the distorted perception of what beauty is by exposing ourselves to seeing real bodies all over the place. So you're like, oh, my body looks like that. Oh, my body looks like that. Oh, my body looks like that.
Normalizing it.
It normalizes the body instead of it being like, I can't achieve what I see in the media.
Exactly.
And then therefore I feel like a failure. I feel awful. I feel like not good enough. I don't feel lovable. I don't like, there's all the rabbit holes that go down the way when we don't love our bodies.
This danger of the inferiority complex that comes out of constantly comparing ourselves to unattainable things that we see on social media. Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. Okay, so what is your courage reference? So this is a moment where despite your fear, you managed to gather the courage to push through and ended up growing from that experience.
Oh my God, that's me every day.
So maybe just like that one moment.
One moment? You want to pick out one moment?
One moment that you have in your pocket that you pull out, that there's a moment where you're just like, man, I can't do this. And you're like, wait a minute, let me get my courage reference. Like this moment that you have in your pocket that was like the epitome of all those moments that you could pull out in those moments where you don't have the courage.
I would say one of them is around my health. So this is an epic day that proves to me that my body is capable of anything. So I'm in Costa Rica. So I've had my car accident. I'm not, I have chronic pain, all these things. And I go to Costa Rica and I get on the bike. And I'm in rural Costa Rica, so like there's not really roads, it's dirt roads, and there's like giant potholes and giant boulders that fill the potholes and stuff. So I borrow my girlfriend's bike. She lives on the top of this hill. I go down the hill on the bike. I ride for an hour to get to the boat. We get to the boat. I get on the boat with like all these super yoga fitness people. And we're going on an adventure to go hang out across the Gulf at this beach. That's the plan. We're just going to hang out and we're going to, go for a nice boat ride and we're going to enjoy the beach on the other side. I'm like, right on. So I pack as if we're going to the beach. Not that we're going to go on a jungle hike and climb waterfalls, but that we're going to go to the beach. So we get over on the other side and they're like, oh, we heard about this waterfall. Let's go check out this really beautiful waterfall. I'm like, okay, great, So we go. So I'm the only one with any jungle experience. So the rest of them are all like have no jungle experience. They're walking in to the jungle with flip flops. We don't have a machete. We don't have a guide. We don't have like nothing. And I'm like, what are you doing? Okay, I'm gonna have to save all of these yogis, right? So I'm like, okay. So we find somebody local, and they're like, oh yeah, the waterfall. Oh, it's like only like 10 minutes up the way.
Costa Rican 10 minutes.
So next thing you know, we have to climb up. We climb up 4 waterfalls to get to the major waterfall, which is a 50-foot waterfall. So we're there. I'm like, it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. I'm glad I've done it. Blah, blah, blah. Then, a local guide comes along with, a machete, as we should be because we're in the jungle. And he's like, oh, if you climb up this waterfall, there's an amazing sacred tree and there's a path that will bring you back along the ocean and back to where you need to go.
Sounds lovely.
Sounds lovely. And of course, I'm with all these yogas people and rock climbers. And they're like, sure. And it's 50 feet straight up.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay. So at that point, I should have said to myself, yeah, you guys are on your own. I'm going back the way I came and I'll meet you at the beach. That would have been the smart thing to do, but no, I did not. So I climb up this pure, straight up, sheer cliff, 50 feet into the air, no ladders, no ropes, no steps, no nothing, no guide, no nothing. And halfway up, I'm like, okay, so and my arms are starting to give out, my legs are starting to give out. I'm like, I have no choice. Like, I have to keep climbing or I'm gonna fall and die on the rocks. Like, there is no choice, right? So I get up to the top. I finally make it to the top. I was like, woo, yay me, I didn't die. And then there's this beautiful tree. It's like ancient tree that they're like climbing all over and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, right? Like, let's go. We got to meet the boat. So basically, I have to lead them out of the jungle. It was a 5-hour truck. Okay.
Wow.
So yeah. So I'd lead them out of the jungle. They're all alive. I'm not sure why. Probably because I'm magical and I talk to all the jungle critters. All right.
Because you're a fairy goddess.
Because I'm a fairy goddess, right? So, and so we get back to the boat, and then we get on the boat, and they go a boat ride across. Then I got to get back onto, like, we get there, and then I have a half an hour bike ride, actually an hour bike ride back to back to where I'm staying. And the last part of the lap, or the length of getting back home, is this very, very, very steep hill. And I'm standing as I'm walking the bike up this steep hill. I'm bawling my eyes out. Like, I'm bawling. I'm crying. I'm bawling. I'm doing every part of my body is stiffened up. I have not trained for this. I am not physically fit. There's nothing about this that I should have even survived, but I have no choice. I can't curl up in the fetal position. It's dangerous where I am. I can't sleep there. I'm like, I gotta climb the fucking stupid hill. So I managed to get up the hill each step crying, like, you can do it. You can do it. No, I can't do it. You can do it. I'm like, no, I can't do it. I finally make it home, right? I had the massage therapist come to the house like 5 days in a row.
I bet.
But that is my, like, without any training, without anything, without like where my abilities are now. So anytime I come up against something on a physical level around like physically capability piece, I'm like, whoa, remember that day in Costa Rica? You shouldn't have survived that. There's no way you should have survived that. So that was when you had no skills like you do now. Mm-hmm. So pull your shit together and do whatever you need to do right now.
Yeah, push through.
Push through.
Absolutely.
So I would say that's the piece that I pull out of my pocket as a reminder to keep pushing myself, to keep healing my body, to keep choosing healthy, to keep moving myself beyond what I have been told that my body should be and my health should be and the level of my health should be.
And even told by yourself as well, because you were even saying, no, I can't do it, right?
Oh,
and then you were proving yourself wrong. No, I can do this. I can push through. No, I can't. Yes, I can. You know, so even having that internal dialogue with yourself of no, I can't do this, and then just really pushing through that. Amazing. Thank you for sharing that story. That's great.
You're welcome. Yeah, and I still use that. I mean, like, there's still that conflict internally when I'm training, always. Especially when I'm training, right? And so I'm like, you can't swim another length. Yes, you can. Remember that day in Costa Rica?
Exactly. And I really love that moment that happens after you do it. Like for me, there's moments in the morning where I'm just like, oh, you know what, today I just really don't feel like doing a yoga flow. I don't have the energy, I don't have the body. And then it's like, okay, this is the moment that you need to do it. When you don't feel like doing it, this is the moment that you need to push through and do it anyways. And it always takes me about 10, 15 minutes where I'm just kind of like, kind of grumpy, just kind of half-ass doing it. And then there's something that kicks in and I'm just like, yeah, but you're doing it. You're doing it right now. And you didn't want to do it, but you're doing, here you are. And then it's like, oh yeah, I'm here, I'm doing this. And then all of a sudden there's like this energy that comes through doing it. And then it's always like one of my best yoga flows. You know what I mean? I'm just like, oh man, that was really good. And then afterwards, I'm just like re-energized and just, hey, you get that fuel. So people often ask, is like, where do you get that fuel? You don't get it before you do it. You have to start the action first. You have to push through that. No, I can't do it. I don't want to do this. I don't have the strength to do it. You have to get through that barrier, and then the fuel just comes pouring out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the key, is that action piece. Like, your brain has all these stories and all these beliefs and all these reasons to sabotage whatever the reasons, and we all have them, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we all have those stories. But it's that taking action piece. Like, once you take that first step, that's when the old pattern gets interrupted, no matter what we're talking about, no matter what it is we're doing. It's like, it's that minute that we take that first action, no matter how much we don't want to do it, it changes the narrative, it changes the story. You might even be arguing with yourself for the first 10 minutes of doing it. I can't do this. You're like, hey, we've been doing it for 10 minutes.
Yeah. Exactly.
But then you get to shift, then it gets that beautiful shift, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then you get whatever it is of the reason why you do that practice, whatever that practice is.
Exactly. Absolutely. So tell me, what was the most impactful thing that you've read, saw, or heard that really anchored this courage to be yourself and to love and accept your body as it is?
I don't know if love and acceptance of my body per se it came from reading something externally. I think that is just my connection to the divine and universe and universal knowledge stuff, and my own need and desire for personal growth and personal development. You know, some people are like other kind of junkie. I'm a personal development and personal growth junkie. So I would say, though, one of the most profound things I've ever read from a particular book was called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways.
Mm.
And this book was this real beautiful book. I highly recommend it. If you haven't read it, it's definitely worth reading. And one of the concepts in the book was that we are ultimately afraid that we will not be able to handle whatever it is. So all fears lead back to, I won't be able to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we change that concept to the core of us, that no matter what, I can handle it, then fear no longer controls our life. And
Mm-hmm.
I live that philosophy. So being bold and being out in the world and being me and all of those things come back to being fearless, right? And it comes back to this core value around, no matter what, I can handle it. Even if it's death, you know, even if it's death, I can handle it. So I think that, I mean, that was one really, really profound piece of information that really was a game changer for me. And the funny part about that is that I was heading off to the Amazon jungle, and a girlfriend handed me this book as I was just about getting ready to go on the plane. And in that adventure of the Amazon jungle, I mean, there's very few places in the world that is like so many things in a short period of the spot can kill you. Maybe Australia, other than the Amazon, maybe Australia. And so here I am sleeping in the jungle with no walls. I'm not even in a hut. It's just like thatch roof and mosquito netting on this bed on top of, you know, the ground, pretty much, right? And the beautiful gift of reading this book while I was in that place was such a profound sort of like understanding of fear, of the difference between real fear and perceived fear. You know, what was happening internally in my body with, you know, fight, flight, or freeze responses when I actually was truly in danger versus not being truly in danger, my perceptions of what I think is danger and not danger. So it was a really great, I couldn't have asked to read this book at any other time of my life in any
Mm-hmm.
other place that would have been as most profound as I was where I was when I read it. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you got to see that difference too, like you said, between the perceived and the like, no, this is actually a dangerous place and there's actually real fear here.
and and challenging that concept of that, even if I do die, because ultimately I'll be able to handle it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's the key thing too, is like always like, okay, well, what's the worst case scenario? And also like the realization that it's a practice. Like we call it a practice for a reason. You know, I kind of went through that where this moment where I'm just like, oh, aha, I get it. I got the lesson. I understood. And then a couple months later, I'm like, wait a minute, it's the same lesson. Like, how did I get back here? I thought I got this, you know? And it's like, well, just because you got the lesson and you got that download or that like aha moment, it doesn't mean that now all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, I've got this and that's done. No, life continues to test you so that you can continue to practice and relearn that lesson and really integrate it, you know?
Well, yeah, I think it's that whole integration piece of like getting all the layers and all the levels of what that particular lesson is, right?
Exactly.
And you know, because I think we get, I think we get knowledge, but it's not wisdom until it's integrated into us for a number of different ways and different situations and different scenarios. Because I think knowledge goes from just being knowledge to wisdom when we can adapt it and we can morph it and we can change it accordingly to, and we can utilize it over here in this new scenario, and we can adapt it to this situation and we can adapt it to there. It goes from that skill of I just know the information to I now have the wisdom of this knowledge. Like this is now a part of my existence. And the only way that happens is if it can show up in many different ways and different scenarios for you to test out your skill sets in it.
Absolutely. Exactly. All right. Well, that was a really, really great conversation and lots of insight. We're coming up on our time here. So I'm just going to do our little lightning round. So first thing that comes to mind, 5 little questions.
Okay.
I love my
Vagina.
Why did I know you were going to say that? I am most powerful when I'm
orgasming.
Love it. Happiness is
frolicking naked in the rain.
Yes. The most important thing for me right now is
joy.
Awesome. All right. Well, finishing up, is there anything that you would like to add or promote? Anything that's coming up for you that you'd like to share?
Yes. So the best way to spend time with me is to come visit me at succulentliving.com. For any like BDSM wellness and education stuff, you can come visit me at empressgaia.com. And don't forget to, I have I have 2 podcasts that I host. So I have My Orgasmic Life, which Veronika actually was on. And Tickle.life is also a fantastic podcast that I host as well. And I have tons of different courses and education and training. I'm always developing content. This fall, I'm doing trauma recovery training, professional training. Right now, I'm creating a course around finding your dream relationships or relationships. So I'm always creating, always developing, and there's tons of content for you to come and play with me in different ways that you can come and spend more time with me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. And for anyone viewing that would like to follow up with Gaia, I'll leave all the links below. And I really enjoyed talking with you. You had me on your podcast last time and now on mine. So I hope that we can do this again. I think that we have some really interesting perspectives and experience that overlap and that are also very different. So it brings some really interesting conversations. So thank you so much for your time today. And I hope we can do it again soon.
Oh, absolutely. And I loved being on the show. And I got to talk about things I don't usually get to talk about. So that was kind of fun. So
Awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, anytime. All right. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you again soon.